Welcome to Radical Apologetics. We're back. I am in Cleveland. I am really excited. For those of you who don't know, apologetics is just a scholarly term for the defense and concrete evidence of somebody's faith. So a lot of times whenever theologians were discussing their ideas, there would be an apology that was written where they would defend that idea and show it with conviction. So that's what this is all about. It's about discovering that pursuit, that truth for spiritual authenticity and realness. We have got Brian with us tonight.
Everybody.
Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're involved in right now, what projects you have going on, what your ministry you're doing is.
Okay. Awesome. I'm Brian Newman. I grew up in West Tennessee, but I live here in Southeast Tennessee now. I spent 4 years in the Air Force and ended up getting a history degree afterwards, a German degree, human services degree from Liberty, emphasis marriage family counseling, and went to seminary for about 11 months before I failed out seminary, and then ended up going to Bible school here in Cleveland and getting ordained, and I became a life coach and wrote some books and stuff, and tried a lot of things to find my ministry path. And every time I think it's going to be one way, it's another. So you end up working all these different places, meeting all these people. So currently what I do for ministry, I help people find their calling. Like if they want to serve God, but they don't know how, especially they don't seem like they fit in the regular church system. I also do dream interpretation. I write books. I had a singles group. And I'm working with Mercy's Blessings here in Cleveland. They are going to open up a School of the Supernatural here in a couple months to teach people how to have supernatural results through mercy instead of through works and being a good person. How to ask God for His mercy, and His mercy is what compels Him to help you and give you wisdom and understanding and direction, instead of, I'm a good person, now you owe me something. You know, the older brother was, Dad, I'm a good person, I served you all this time, bring me something. But the prodigal said, I don't deserve anything, but your character is merciful, so I'm asking you out of your character of mercy to help give me mercy, help me out.
I got you.
And that's such a paradigm shift from growing up in being a churchy place like we are.
Yeah.
So I do a little different stuff. My real passion is helping people find where they belong.
Okay, right on.
And the ministry is Psalm 16 Ministry. You look it up, psalm16.com. Psalm16ministry.com. And there's a lot of resources on there about almost everything. But it comes in the verse, even in the night my heart instructs me, is what King David said. So God's given him dreams and speaking to him about the way he should go with his life directly.
Right on.
Inspired. Yes, sir. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's kind of a big circle sometimes.
No, I feel you. I have, and we'll get to some of the questions, but like as we're talking, I always have this like weird line that I tote. Because, so like my mom and dad used to call them camps, right? Like within church, you had these like camps. So I grew up young in like the charismatic movement, the Word of Faith camp, which was like Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin.
Like these cultural trends that run through the church. Divide into little groups.
Banners and the whole deal, right? And then there was another movement. I want to say it was like 2010, 2012, somewhere around there, where there was this teaching going around, like, forgive me, I don't know who started it, but the teaching was called the Manifest Sons of God, right? And
was that the Little Gods teaching?
Kind of,
Creflo Dollar and Joyce Meyer and Kenneth Copeland and Kenneth Hagin are all on that train.
Sort of, and so, like, on the charismatic side, right? You had all of these teachings that came out. I mean, series after series. And then they would have workbooks that could come to your church and everything of like a program to see miracles.
Okay.
Almost like they're teaching you a recipe.
Yeah, like a formula.
Yeah. And everybody had their recipe. Now then on the other side of it with like this Manifest Sons of God teaching, they said, no, the same power that raised Christ from the dead is alive and well and working within you. You are now a joint heir. Just do it. Now, and here's what I always take things to the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the blessing of how I got where I am. But
You follow the logic. Where does the logical conclusion?
yeah,
The slippery slope
because
argument.
on this side, it seemed, just me personally, I never use this to knock or downplay anyone. It's just my journey. But on this side, it almost seemed like we took away from the power of the cross. We said that the power of the cross was to get you in heaven, but now you have to do all of these things to unlock God.
It's almost Gnostic.
Correct.
It's this secret teaching for $29.99.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you how to. Simon Magnus
there's
stuff.
more.
Yeah. Simon the Magnus stuff.
But then on the other side, like Manifest Sons of God, they went so far as to say they were beyond temptation.
And they're not, but they're tempted by pride. So there that went.
So like you see, like on one side we're walking in it, but man, like pride can like eke its way in. Then on the other side, it's like, it's almost like
it's Gnostic on both ends almost, because one side you basically have become your own God.
Yeah.
I'm a little God, so I can just speak things happening because I'm so holy. And the other side is this formula, but it's the soul. The soul is the mind, will, and emotions, and they're all supposed to submit to the Spirit. The Spirit of God's supposed to direct your mind, will, and emotions. But on one end, they had the like a holiness movement. Our willpower is so strong that we just conquered all of our sins.
Yeah.
Because the will is part of the soul. On the other side, well, we're so smart. We figured out the secret code to make God do stuff.
Yeah.
Against his will even. So there's like, on one side, the will is stronger than the spirit because there's no humility. On the other side, the mind is stronger than the spirit in the person. There's no humility. And sometimes you get the emotions. We just get ecstatic enough and fall on the floor and dance and yell enough, and God will do something because we're so emotional.
Right.
Which the emotions are strong in the spirit. So there's these different aspects of the soul, and they're always contrary to each other.
Right.
If we all submitted the spirit to one spirit, we'd have more unity, but everyone's got part of their soul is out of control, and they find other people have the same problem, and they get together and make a denomination out of it.
Word. And what's interesting though for me, and like part of what like I would say drove me to my madness, because realistically, man, whenever I got clean, when I was going through my inventory and like trying to clean house, you know,
personal inventory.
Yeah,
Take
a
fearless,
lot of it.
your fearless personal inventory.
Correct. A lot of it was geared towards God and the church. And it was these misconceptions, like Abraham Joshua Heschel referred to God as the great I am not. Right? This thing outside of me. And
He's outside of the shared human experience.
Yeah,
well, that's why Jesus, because the priest that can relate to our sufferings.
Right.
And God didn't judge Sodom and Gomorrah without personally witnessing it.
Yeah.
And he, and to judge mankind, he had to come experience some of it before he could accurately give out rewards and punishments.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to do it from afar.
So here's my thing that like frustrated me, right? I before we started, we were talking about how my crisis moment was going through Romans 9 and struggling with Calvinism and predestination because of the characters it attached to God. And so my issue was like, as I'm working all that out, I had a guy recommend to me, and I don't know if he remembers this. He retired from Lee recently. His name was Dr. Effler.
Okay.
But when I was having my struggles, he took me on his family vacation with him.
Wow.
And I remember one night sitting out on the beach with his son. I was smoking a cigar, and Dr. Effler looked at me and he said something to the effect of, "Josh, have you gone back and read it like a story, like it was real?"
Like a narrative, not like a theological
because
formula to figure out.
I was pre-grad. I wasn't pastoral ministries. I didn't want to have anything to do with ministry, the church, religion. I needed to know.
Yeah.
You
for
know?
yourself.
Yeah.
You had that Hebrew, that Yada knowledge.
Yeah.
Adam knew Eve, Yada.
Yeah.
Not Adam. In Spanish and German and all these languages, we have a word for to know by heart. There's differently from a word to know by head. Yeah. But in English we don't, so we get confused. But you know you had the head, but you need the heart to connect.
Right.
Because you don't want to preach something that's not real to you.
And so the issue I had is like I wanted my answer to be within the confines of Christianity and specifically the Protestant faith. I wanted to find the answers there because of my roots and how my parents brought me up and everything. I knew it had to be right there, but then whenever
you don't want conflict.
You
don't want to like have to pick one.
Right, and then whenever I would go to like, okay, who actually has something real, something tangible?
Yeah.
It was, okay, well, you need to fast this many days. You need to get rid of all secular music. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need to do this.
Here's your formula.
Oh, you're not baptized with the evidence of praying in tongues. You need that. You need this. You need this before anything can be tangible.
Which is contrary to the entire Hebrew Bible.
Word, exactly.
Abraham's walking around like there's a statue of this Baal and Ashtoreth and Tammuz and everybody else. And God's like, hey, smacks him on the head.
And that's the thing is like, all of these teachings of what is required of me for it to be real, right? All of these teachings, whenever I broke them down, I would look in the Bible and I'm like, think about how many people were in that royal court whenever a random floating hand started carving on the wall.
Yeah.
Now, how many of them were holy?
One.
Okay.
Well, Daniel wasn't even in the room. They brought him in later, so nobody. And
not a soul.
I think in Hebrew, it basically implies that the king pooped his pants. He was so terrified.
Okay, exactly.
Yeah, so no one there is fasting and praying and doing Bible studies 5 hours a day. And God showed up.
Right, and
Pharaoh's dream, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, God showed up.
And what was hard for me is as I read these stories, I didn't see holiness. I saw God moving in spite of man.
Yeah.
I didn't see God moving because of man.
Right. He moved out of his mercy either because one person was oppressing the other one, someone needed to be rescued, or the people he had a covenant with someone, or someone was crying out for mercy. But it was always God initiated, almost always God initiated, because he's got some higher purpose. It wasn't because everybody got holy enough.
Right. But what was weird is, so I got super frustrated. When I left, I ended up a part of several different ministries and teams. And whenever I would get close with the leadership of the team, they would start talking to me. What are you looking for? What is it, Josh?
And I would something deeper than they can offer. And that makes people very uncomfortable. In ministry, because you're expected to know all the answers, I think in theology is, you're in an occupation where you could never say that you don't know.
Right.
You're unemployed if you do.
And the thing is, like, not only most of them, not only do I know you not know, but admitting you don't know makes you angry.
Yeah.
And that's what was hard for me is whenever I would go to these people that I looked up to as like spiritual leaders, and I would say, hey man, listen, aside from everything else, because of the trauma in my life, because of all these things I've been through, I need to know it's real. Can you show me? And the fact is, like, it doesn't say don't ask for a sign and a wonder. It says, blessed are those who are able to believe without it. I'm not one of them. And I'm okay with that. That doesn't mean I'm going to hell. It just means, man, I got to know now.
More. I mean, Thomas went to heaven.
Word.
And faith is a spiritual gift, and there's measures of faith. So some people just have more of the gifting than others.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a spiritual gift of faith, where you just have a supernatural amount of it, enough to cover everyone else's doubt.
But when I went to other groups, because you only get kicked out of internships and all this so many times before you're like, I'm not trying no more.
Yeah, you're done. You're burnt.
Right. And it wasn't because of like I was doing something crazy. It was because I was seeking at a rate that made people uncomfortable. And so when I found other people, other groups, whether it be Wiccans, Satanists, Druids, all forms of pagans, and I said, hey, show me. Okay.
Show you something.
And the
Not
thing,
something you want, but they'll show you something.
right?
Yeah.
But the thing was, they had such conviction and confidence, and they knew like that. Oh, you want to see? I'll show you. And I couldn't find it in a Christian, and that hurt.
It's sad.
And so it led me through like all of this, because the fact is, Christianity is the only faith I found where there's a rule in a lot of pagan faiths it's called the law of exchange. Okay, and it means that basically for everything you get, something costs you equally.
Yeah, it's the only grace is when it doesn't cost you. Because the leadership class I go to on Sunday nights, they talk about how to have favor or blessing without cost. Because so many people, they get it, but they lose their family, they lose their mind, they lose their ministry, they go to jail. I mean, there's always an exchange.
Yeah.
It's like blood sacrifices, and the pagan world is like you have to, it's going to, like a blood libel, it's going to cost somebody their life or something. And it's not free. It always comes at this just negative experience. It comes
right.
He gives, but God gives without, he blesses without burden.
And he gives gifts without repentance.
He gives without repentance, and he gives gifts without sorrow.
Yeah.
When God gives you a gift, it comes without sorrow attached, which separates the nature of Yahweh from the nature of the pagan gods. The pagan gods are in it to get something. It's like a business owner. He's not giving you a business owner. If you go to like a fallen angel or whatnot, they're not doing it out of charity.
Yeah.
You give them something, and they get something they wanted. It's
like
a business.
Yeah.
It's like the mafia. It's extortion. But when Yahweh does it, it's out of his character, like you give gifts to your kids.
Yeah.
You don't change your baby's diaper because he's going to give you $20.
Right.
You change his baby because you love your baby and it's poopy and it's going to hurt him.
Yeah.
So that's Yahweh is contrary to the nature. Even his nature is contrary to the nature of the pagan world, where these fallen angels were doing an exchange. Like you give something that's going to cost you sorrow, and they give you whatever minor thing you wanted. But God gives without sorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's it. For me, it all led up to me being at a treatment center in Alabama.
Yeah.
And I sat outside the pond at this treatment center, and I prayed the first honest prayer I've ever prayed in my life. And it is widely not acceptable in churches. But I said, God, it's all left. But I said it like somebody was listening for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And I felt love. And I tell the guys in the treatment center when they would ask, like, how in the world did you end up a Christian? Because, I was all... And I would tell them, like, straight up, it was the first one that didn't cost me anything and loved me back.
Yeah. It was, as said, it's the loving kindness, or mercy, or we must say grace in the Christian world. But with kased in Hebrew, like a loving kindness.
Yeah.
Like, it's comparative, like, to when a mother loves her child.
Yeah.
That is not an exchange. Like you said, it's not a transaction. It's not a business arrangement.
Yeah.
It's not an extortion like the spiritual mafia.
Right.
It's just loving kindness. But you approach with humility.
Yeah.
And that's the blockage for church people usually is pride. God, you owe me this. But if you're in a drug rehab, if you're in a homeless shelter, you're in a prison, like, God don't owe me nothing. I'm just asking. Because it's called the faith of an empty hand, like Georgia Clay song. It's the faith of an empty hand. It's like, I have nothing in my hand to give. It's just purely mercy if I receive something. So you approach with humility.
Yeah.
And faithfulness and thankfulness and brokenness. And then he responded.
Word.
Because what we're taught in church is approach with, God, here's a list of 10 things. I did 9 of them.
Yeah.
Where's my paycheck?
Yeah. So if somebody had just met you and we're like, hey man, I've heard you're involved in all these things you're doing, involved in these ministries, these classes, all this different stuff. Can you just wipe all that out and sum up what you believe in one doctrine of faith?
Okay. So try to pull it down. The universe has a creator.
Yeah.
He's always been there. He always will be there. He's all-powerful, all-knowing, and he has our best interest at heart because that's his character. It's not because we do anything cool because we're idiots, but because that's his character, as his nature is to want to bless us. But he also respects our free will. So he gave us the tools. He gives us, if we ask him for knowledge, wisdom, understanding, he'll give that to us. but it's up to us to use it.
Yeah.
And the problems in the world are, we created that. We did these problems. We can ask him to help us, and we can ask him to give us the tools to help it. The Jews call it tikkun olam, repair the world. Each of us has a responsibility to repair the world that we help break. Each of us has been equipped in a very unique way in order to do that part of the repairing. Like spiritually, sometimes you're a plumber or electrician or roofer, but you have a part in repairing this thing. And if you can approach God with humility and say, hey, show me what I can do.
Yeah.
Show me what you made me to do. So he'll give us an assignment. So you wake up every single day, just ask him what that assignment is. And that's part of the role of mankind, is fear God, keep his commandments. Generally speaking, but also fear God and keep his commandments to us personally. Like, what did he command you? Did he command you to feed the homeless? Did he command you to work at a drug rehab? Did he command you to write a book? Did he command you to take care of your kids? Whatever the commandment is. And we have a personal responsibility for that. And as far as salvation goes, one human being can never die for another human being. Because if you're on death row, you can't die for someone else on death row. God is perfect justice and perfect mercy. You have to have both. Otherwise, you have a weak God or a tyrannical God. You have to make justice and mercy both. But if we're both in death row, I can't die for your crimes. You can't die for mine. So we're human beings, and all of us have sinned. So it would take a perfect human being. But there was a perfect human being. He could only die for one person. Blood libel and magic. All kinds of blood have value. So only the blood of the Creator, only divine blood, is both pure and innocent enough and powerful enough to cover the sins of all mankind. If it was tainted, it couldn't cover anybody.
Right.
But one human being could only die for another human. It would take divine blood to have enough spiritual power to cover the crimes of all humanity for all time. So that's where Christianity comes in, that whole big thing.
Word.
Because I'm Christian, but I'm very heavily influenced by the first century church, which was very influenced by Judaism.
Yeah.
So it's the combination of those. There's a creator, justice, and mercy both equally. And we've all done terrible things, and his justice part kicks in.
Yeah.
To say somebody's got to pay for that, but his mercy part kicks in and says it doesn't have to be you.
Right.
Because his blood can cover all of it, and there's no other way around it that all humanity's crimes can be forgiven, if they ask.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to force his will upon you. He's not going to kidnap you to heaven to be with him forever. Because you don't want to be with God, then why would he kidnap you and force you to be there?
Right.
But without him, he's light and life and goodness, but you don't want him. That all you're left with is darkness, deception, and badness, which we call hell.
Yeah.
It's just the absence of God. If you don't want God, this is the alternative, but you don't know what you're missing out on, because if you reject the light, all you have is darkness.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nutshell.
I got you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. So,
circle.
like, one question I have is, and you see this some around Cleveland. I actually ran into it the first time with one of my professors at Lee, who invited us to go to Passover at his church.
Yeah.
And he was not Jewish in bloodline in any way.
Right. And I'm not that I know of. I might be.
Okay.
I never did a test, though.
So, like, I'm just curious, because I never got a chance to ask him. How did like what most people see as regular Christianity or contemporary Christianity, how did yours morph to where it included so much of the Judaism aspect?
Well, I grew up in a town, no traffic light, small southern town, a log cabin. There's no traffic light. There's 13 kids in the entire 8th grade. There's a Pentecostal church and a Baptist church, and everyone else is on drugs. It's like Tim McGraw's on drugs or Jesus. You get two options.
Okay.
Church or drugs, and sometimes people mix them together. So my mom drove me to Baptist church. My dad sold drugs, and I didn't really grow up churchy.
Yeah.
So over time, it's like, well, I got to figure out who I am and what I believe, and I could go with the path. So I got more on the church side, but it just felt like so much was just missing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we wear some khaki pants and show up Sunday morning and go eat after. This is life.
Yeah.
I mean, my goodness. So I just started digging deeper and deeper and deeper. I had an aunt as a Sabbath keeper. So, when I was in 8th grade, my 8th grade teacher gave me a Bible, student Bible, read the entire thing cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation. You read 3 chapters a day. During the week, 5 on Sabbath, you can read an entire year. So I did that 3 times. But I started at Genesis. I didn't start in John. I started in Genesis. And that changes everything. Because the whole book has to line up and be congruent. Otherwise, something's wrong.
Yeah, I feel
you know, you're not understanding something if it contradicts itself. So I started in Genesis. And that changed everything because the church kept telling me, well, ignore the first 2/3 of it. Or Jesus did away with that. So God says one thing and Jesus says another. That makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
And I started digging deeper and deeper, some church history. And Philip Yancey had a book, The Bible Jesus Read.
Yeah.
And a book, The Jesus I Never Knew. He talks about Jesus was Jewish. And we had completely lost track of that. And the Bible Jesus read, Matthew didn't exist. The book of Matthew. The Gospels didn't exist. Acts didn't exist. They had Genesis to Malachi. That's all they had. So you took Genesis to Malachi and read it, what would you come away with? You know, if, you know, especially believe Jesus is the Messiah, and all these things point to him. But it would be a very different faith if we didn't have 2,000 years of Catholicism, for example,
right,
influencing that. And the first century, 150 years ago, a guy named Marcion came in the church, and he said there's two gods in the Bible. God, Yahweh is this angry, vengeful God, and Jesus is a nice, merciful Mr. Rogers God.
Right.
And Jesus just kind of took over for Yahweh. Like, Jesus came to deliver us from Yahweh.
Yeah.
And the New Testament was to deliver us from the Old Testament. And this is what the church basically believes. You boil it down, most of the church believes Jesus saved us from God, and the New Testament replaces the Old Testament. I just never found that plausible. So why did that happen? You dig through church history, it was a lot of anti-Semitism. Because the first century church, 1 Corinthians 5, the Apostle Paul is telling Greek Gentile believers in a Greek city full of Greeks to do Passover. He says, therefore let us keep the feast. And he starts talking about Passover. So he's telling Gentile, formerly pagan Greeks to keep the feast of Passover.
Yeah.
In Acts 15, the apostles all together tell them, let's tell the Gentiles to go to the synagogue on the Sabbath to hear Moses being read. Like, where they're telling Gentiles to go to synagogue on Sabbath to hear the Torah. So this is very different from anything you'd ever hear in church.
Yeah.
And as you see the first, second, and third centuries, Christianity was very, very Jewish. It was a sect of Judaism. Paul said, I follow a sect called the Way. Christianity wasn't a separate religion. It was just another type of Judaism. There's Pharisees, and the Sadducees, and the Essenes, and the Nazarenes, or the Christians. So you just go back to that, and what did the first century church do? And it was already had problems, as you see in Corinthians. But we got way off the rails now after 2,000 years of anti-Semitism. And in the third century, Constantine came in and said, if you do any of this Jewish stuff, I'm just going to kill you. And the church has a long history of killing people. Don't agree with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the church has killed more Christians than all the world governments combined. And we fear governments and pagans. It's like, the church is the one that killed everybody.
Right.
With most of history. So Constantine came in and said, if you do the Sabbath, I'll kill you. If you do Passover, I'll kill you. And he had all the bishops backing him up.
Yeah.
But before that happened, around 325, the church is very, very Jewish. So this is my viewpoint. What did Jesus and the apostles do? And they did this lot of stuff that we now call Jewish. Back then, it was just what you did if you believed in God, like the God-fearers, Acts 10. Or if you believed in Jesus, is what you did the first 2 or 3 centuries. Now, when the church replaces something with a pagan custom, whatever they replace is Jewish, and whatever they replace it with is Christian. But that took centuries to happen.
Yeah.
So that's my basic premise. Jesus and the apostles did it. First century Christians did it. Why don't we do it?
Yeah.
And generally the answer is, well, they don't like Jewish people.
Fair enough.
We don't like them. We got to be over here. We'd be separate. Like the older brother and the younger brother. The older brother and the prodigal. We don't like each other. So we define ourselves by not being that. We don't define ourselves by, well, we follow Jesus, follow God, believe in the Bible. We define ourselves by, we're not Jewish, or we're not Baptist, or we're not Pentecostal, or we're not whatever.
Yeah.
When you define yourself by what you're not, that's when the problems start.
So it kind of leads us into our second question. And I word it a little different for different people, but basically, like for instance, there's certain faiths that have tripped me up. Certain faiths that I studied, because my deal is, if you're going to say something doesn't work, you have to do it perfectly.
Oh, this before you say it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't. In recovery, they call it contempt prior to investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I tried it for 5 minutes, didn't work.
Yeah.
I dieted for 6 hours. I'm still fat. Just got my money back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, one that I reference often, just because it creeped me out, just being honest, was Crowleyism.
Yeah. Aleister Crowley had the World Satanist Church.
Correct. So like,
influenced
he
the
wrote
Beatles.
his foundational truth for everything was, do as thou wilt, for that is the whole of the law.
You're your own God, your own lawgiver, and you're an egomaniac.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then
It's
followed
narcissism
by
made spiritual.
love under will. Word. And it's just, it
Creepy.
tings just enough of a chord to give me the heebie-jeebies.
Well, you discern spirits.
Right.
And that spirit is what Satan told Eve. You can be your own God. You don't need God. Just pick for yourself what's good and evil.
So
Make
if
it up as you go.
If I meet a follower of the Golden Dawn or one of these other esoteric,
Sophism.
sects,
Yeah.
I would ask them, okay, well, where does that thought, that initial truth, where does it stop in your life? Because
what is
do
the
as
limit?
thou wilt. Are you really going to the same extremes as Crowley when he said that?
The most evil man on the planet, according
Right.
to newspapers.
And so by the same token, though, I've read books like The Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne and Jesus for President and stuff like that. And I question Christians. Okay, cool, man. But, like, where does Jesus stop? So
How far are you willing to go this? So Todd Bentley has song, My Jesus will never be accepted in my church. Dirt on his blood on his feet might stain the carpet. And he reaches for the hurt and despises the crowd. I think he preferred Bill Street to the stained glass crowd. And then he talks about Jesus wasn't the poster child for American prosperity. It's like, boom. If I don't get to wear khakis and drive an SUV and live in the suburbs, I mean, where's the limit on your Jesusness? And when your Jesusness crosses your Americanism, what's the line there? Because sometimes Dr. Michael Brown says, don't love your Judaism more than you love your Jesus. And sometimes they say, don't love your Americanism more than you love your Jesus.
Word.
Because we made him into a JCPenney model or something. I don't know.
Well, and that's what's hard is, like, I'm looking for the one that Isaiah prophesied was ugly.
The suffering Messiah, the priestly Messiah.
Yeah, I'm looking for the authentic, the core. Like,
There was nothing in his appearance to draw us to him.
Yeah,
he didn't like Jim Caviezel.
You know how a hug from your papaw, who had been rough and worn and everything, felt different?
It's the Velveteen Rabbit effect. He's real.
Yeah, and so, but what I found was he was real until I'm just throwing out some hot buttons, okay?
Okay.
He's real
Hot take.
until they're taking our jobs. He's real until they're taking my taxes. He's real until, and the thing is, like, I'm not picking any side of anything.
Yeah.
I'm saying that, you know what, I'll just say it. I feel, my personal belief, is that patriotism is nothing more than glorified racism.
Here's what I put on Facebook 2 days ago. It's a Roman religion.
Absolutely.
It's a Roman religion. The founding fathers, George Washington, pretty well interchangeable. They're both demigods at this point. How rotten they are. Oh my gosh, he's going to preach to the world and save the world. And, he's Caesar with a wig on. This is the point we've gotten to. Or ancestor worship. He's the Washington Monument. The guy's casket and above it, he's literally depicted as Zeus.
Yeah.
I mean, these are like the patriarchs of the religion of patriotism, which is the Roman religion of Columbia, which is the state is going to be victorious, or Nike in Greek. It's a Roman religion.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah, and some people go to the other extreme of despising their nation. So the Jews go to Babylon 70 years. They're taking slaves by these pagans, and who terrible things to them. But Jeremiah said, tell the people to pray for the prosperity of the place they're going. Because when you live somewhere, you want God to have mercy on the place you live. Because there's earthquakes and floods. You live there, you're going to get flooded too. So we have to find that balance
Yeah.
of not being so like having some Roman dedication to
Yeah.
an American Caesar, and at the same time praying for the place we're at, where it won't be cursed. But at the same time, also God have mercy on us, because we do some messed up stuff as a nation,
Well,
and it's a hard line to walk.
You have that on the macro scale, right, of like nation size,
Yeah.
and then bringing it down to the micro scale. Shane Claiborne said that you are either one of three disciples. You're Peter, Peter's mother-in-law, or Judas.
Jeez, I'm not saying it's not true, but it's harsh.
It is. It's
Yeah.
extremely.
Yeah.
But what he said was, you either gave all, you made all available, or you made all try to fit.
Yeah.
And so, like, when we take it from that nationwide scale of, like, forget the immigrants, forget the children, forget this, we'll spend $100,000 on an anti-abortion campaign, but won't drop 20 on an adoption campaign.
No, that's
like, all of these things, but you break it all the way down to a dude comes by and, like, you just got the 5 for $5, and you don't really need chicken nuggets, a sandwich, fries, and a drink.
Yeah.
And you don't give all excess so that not one brother or sister was in need among you, because that's in Acts 2.
Or the other side of that, it was Acts 2 was voluntary. It wasn't the Romans going to come up with a sword and chop your head off for not giving your extra chicken nugget.
The credit they gave to it was they said because they were endowed with the Spirit, they gave all excess.
Voluntarily. There's a voluntary aspect, and like abortion is like, well, $200 for an abortion, $20,000 to adopt a child. Do we really care if we're making this so cheap to take a life, but this so expensive to preserve one?
Or
something's out of whack here.
I've got a great solution, and this is one of my hot buttons because I've seen. I played music with a well-known worship artist whose mom had aborted him, and it wasn't successful.
Right.
By the same token,
so those kids are growing up like, I could have not been here. Or my
yeah.
sister,
By the
my
same
mom almost
token,
killed sister.
I've also been with the woman who had been raped, and that baby was not her choice. And she didn't want to look at that man's face every day for 18 years.
Well, she could adopt it, but it's a hard choice.
Right.
We boil it down to oversimplification of, this is an easy thing. No, I think it should be, the baby should be kept, you shouldn't punish a child for the sins of the father, but we should not pretend that's an easy thing.
I got a great solution, and me and Tyrone were talking about this last night. So, my idea, right? Because Jesus said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Right.
And in my attitude, that means keep him off your back. If you just give him what's his, go away. But, so with all of the 501c3s, all the nonprofits that are absolutely running rampant across our country for all kinds of reasons and everything, whatever you're running your nonprofit for, great. I hope you're reaching people. I hope they feel loving kindness, warmth, cared for, and acceptance, right? But what if for 1 year, every nonprofit in our country that claimed Jesus is Lord took all of their tax savings for that 1 year and put it into free adoptions and free food?
That would be miraculous.
Word. In one day, we would experience the miracle of Pentecost. Because a miracle of Pentecost, from what I read, when I read it as a story and not for study, the miracle of Pentecost was not that they heard the gospel in their language that person didn't speak.
They're on one accord. That was the bigger miracle. Having
The
been around church
biggest
circles.
miracle for me, because like I grew up right here in East Cleveland, the biggest miracle for me was think about everybody who had to come home for that feast from all over.
Yeah.
I heard one theologian say there were 6 million Jews there.
In one city.
And
no running
it
water.
says with 6 million
for the
Jews, it says that because they were endowed with the Spirit, they gave all excess so that not one need, not one hunger, not one specific, not one need could be found among 6 million people. You mean to tell me that they let the uninhibited presence of God show up and they ended poverty in a day? I don't want to see another, excuse me, I don't want to see another blind man healed. I don't want to see another crippled man walk. I want to see a young kid who realizes that God loves him because he's never gone hungry, and it wasn't because of free lunch at the school. Like, what happened to us taking care of the widows and the orphans when we'll do a whole campaign to put red tape over our mouth that says life and preach and pray and all this stuff for 365 days a year, 24/7. But we won't take that rent to cover 10 adoptions in 1 year to where 10 children feel that love. You know what I mean? It's like
you're saying we have to preserve the lives we save.
Word.
Yeah. When there's, in Judaism, you have to, the maintaining of life is the highest commandment.
Yeah.
And so the end of poverty amongst believers, well, it was uninhibited, but a lot of the poverty we cause because we get out of alignment with God and we have priorities of following Him. And also the term Christian is so loose now.
Yeah.
It is so loose. Back then, like, you're a Christian, that meant your whole family probably disowned you and you might get martyred any minute.
Yeah.
So these are like real thorough Christians, not, grandma goes to church, I guess I'll go too, Chick-fil-A Christian. It wasn't a Chick-fil-A Christianity. You can't have that Chick-fil-A Christianity because there's so much American thinking or socialist thinking or communist thinking or democratic thinking or whatever, because you have to have the mind of Messiah. Like Joseph didn't come to Egypt with goodwill alone. He came in with God gave him instructions. And we have to have not just the heart of Jesus, we have to have the heart of Messiah, we have to have the mind of Messiah too, to make it work in a functional way.
Yeah.
Because these are all like thoroughly committed Christians thinking biblically about it in poverty. Mentorship and these kind of things, these principles they put in Acts, because the book of Acts is written to the church. Like the Torah is written to the nations. Well, the Torah is written to the nation of Israel to take it to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So the Torah was written to Israel to take to the rest of the world. That was the point of the priests of the world, to show them how to solve all these problems.
Yeah.
And the book of Acts is written to the church to give them a model of how to solve these problems for the rest of the world. So we can't, when we try to blend it so much, exactly what you're talking about is we have these mixed loyalties.
Yeah.
And these mixed ways of thinking. So half of it's going to work and half of it isn't, and then half that doesn't work, people say it didn't work. So the Hebraic concept of faith is a loyalty, a trusting loyalty. Your loyalty is to, you're a kingdom of priests, a holy priesthood, a nation of believers, not loyal to America or France or wherever you grew up at.
Right.
You're loyal to God, not loyal to a president. You're loyal to the New Jerusalem, not to America or China or Brazil or wherever. And that's the concept, American concept of faith. You have intellectual belief, but it's about loyalty and trust. Those two things, a trusting loyalty. So if we had that loyalty to God above everything else, it wouldn't be mitigated by the nationalism or Christian nationalism or even by socialism or communism or any of that stuff. It would be, what did God say? Not what did Nietzsche say or what did Marx say or what did Washington say. Went back to what did God say?
Yeah.
And we are so conflated, our Christianity with our Americanism, we can't separate them anymore. And that's the problem I think we're both agreeing on. That we've conflated being American with being Christian, and we can't separate it. And the American half ain't working.
No, it's not. And that's what I mean whenever I say, like, where does Jesus stop? Because
it's going to conflict one day.
Yeah, at some point
you're going to have you have contrary kingdoms, but we pretend it's not contrary.
Right, and that's what is so hard for me. Is like, for me to give you an example. One time, I had a guy. He was doing it from a good place, okay, but he was a part of a very strong charismatic movement that came out in the early 2000s. And they needed musicians, and so I was a part, and I was struggling because I was seeing the same thing every night. Like, all these teenagers come up, let's pray for them all to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and like all this, like, rah, 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 rah. But
fire
then,
tunnels,
like,
all the rest of it. Yeah.
right, like, but then, like, you'd see a cat that was asking his youth pastor if he could spot him some money for lunch and, like, all this.
Yeah.
And it was like, we have messed up. And so, like, I was telling him, like, why is it not real? Like, it baseline, it says for me to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It tells me that it's supposed to look like that.
Not Washington's will to be done.
Right.
Or Jefferson's will, or Marx's will, or whoever's will.
Yeah.
God's will.
And so this dude looks at me, and I don't think he probably doesn't know this to this day. But, like, I don't think he realized the desperation I had in me. And he goes, Josh, have you left everything? Have you denied everything and followed him? So what that meant for me was I left, went up 64 into Cherokee National Forest, went into the woods buck naked for 2 weeks, screaming my lungs out for God to show up.
Yeah.
That's what I need. But then I would go around and it's like this, like, mamby-pamby, dance around, like, and I'm like, man,
The Chick-fil-A Christianity.
Yeah, I just need it to be real. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what some people definitely need is the realness, because there's something called the clarity cost principle. The clearer something is, the more important it is, and the harder it must be.
Yeah.
So if you're going to dedicate yourself to something that's going to require that much, you want it to be real. If you expect Christianity to require little, Jesus to require little of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool, whatever, man. You get
Yeah.
a little hippie about it. If you expect Jesus might have you go to Afghanistan and live in a tent and preach the Taliban, you're going to need to know it's real, for sure.
Yeah.
You need some solid, real life. You are real evidence before I pack up and go preach the Taliban. So, but our expectations are the willingness we have to just kind of go along with grandma's religion shows our low expectations and our low concept of what we think is going to be required.
Yeah.
If we really understood the first century level what would be required, we'd probably want to put our finger on someone's side too.
Yeah.
You know, because it was real for them. It's like they might kill all of us. At the very least, we won't be welcome in church anymore, and Grandma won't talk to us. But you know, it's like you would need a lot of evidence, understanding, because Thomas was the only one willing to go to the cross with him, because he told him, "I'm going to Jerusalem. They're going to kill me." And Thomas said, "We'll go with you." No one else did, just Thomas. So Thomas understood the gravity of that. Everyone else was along for the ride, waiting at that point, waiting to get a throne somewhere, because they thought Jesus was going to destroy the Romans. But Thomas understood, we're probably going to die for this. And then he was the one to go. And then later on, he's the one that needs to put the finger in the side. But he wasn't rebuked for it. I mean, you don't see Jesus flipping out on Thomas.
So, like, here's an interesting little, like, flip of the coin. And we'll get towards wrapping things up. But when we talk about, there's a great quote by Kierkegaard where he talks about, as soon as we read the New Testament, we are obligated to act accordingly. And that's a really heavy statement.
Oh, that's like, so we don't dig deep in the Bible, because what if it says something that's going to require change?
What if it makes me change?
Yeah.
And I think that is what it comes down to, is like, in the end, you seem like extremely devoted. Your beliefs come with conviction. You've taken not just it's not a label that you have, but it's become a lifestyle for you.
I very much struggle with a lot of doubts and a lot of things, but I want the truth.
Yeah.
But wanting the truth and living up to the truth that was a different thing entirely. But I have a desire for it.
So let me ask you this, like, from your background of growing up and everything, being kind of split home.
The two worlds.
Yeah,
it's like Blade,
2 worlds.
the day walkers and the night walkers.
Right.
You're kind of half and half.
So, like, with you going, like, not just all out for Christianity, but like, okay, the roots of Christianity. I don't just want to repeat after me. I want to do it right.
I want to know what the right way is.
So like, what
and try to do it is not easy, but at least be aware of it.
What happened that made it this much of a passion for you? That made it to where it was like, I can't let go of this.
I tried to let go for a long time. So my mom died at 14. My dad's, doing drugs and got Hell's Angels in my living room. It was fun. We know we're going to eat that day. And I was so mad at God for like 10 years. Black nail painting, rice books, Vampire the Masquerade. I was gothic. I was pissed. I was out there. But I never could run completely away. I think part of that's my mom's prayers, because she was extremely devoted. I think my mom's prayers was a lot of it. It made my brother come back when he ran away, made me come back when I ran away. That's part of it. And I was like 10 or 12. I call it a Solomon experience. And Solomon had a lot of issues. I had the same issues as Solomon. It was like girl crazy, and then reading books and knowing about things that were probably aren't good for me. So the intellectual curiosity, about killed him. But I was like 10 or 11 or 12. I was laying in bed, and I just had like a Solomon moment, I think, of where I felt God was asking me what I wanted. Like, what do you want? I said, love and wisdom. And and I think that kind of set my course. Even all these twists and turns.
Yeah.
Wisdom was like, God, what is you? What do you say about this? What's real? Because turning silver to get wisdom.
Yeah.
It's the most precious thing you can have is wisdom and love.
Yeah.
And I ended up working at a drug rehab. I worked at a halfway house guys who got out of prison. I worked at inner city Boys and Girls Club. Took care of a guy in a wheelchair. I got people out of the mental health hospital here for a living. My current job, I help people with autism, Down syndrome, stuff like that. I get services. And I'm not even a social work major. I was trying to be a teacher. I'm going to teach history in Germany and move back overseas and live overseas and teach. It'd be cool. But it didn't happen that way. So that love and wisdom, and I had so many experiences and met so many people and see so many perspectives. It's just insane, like the Jewish connections and the Christian connections. And I studied ninjutsu, the Japanese ninja, how they fight hand to hand. Ninjutsu, and I just got exposed to all these different things. Yeah. The people that grow up in a trailer park in a town without a traffic light generally aren't around. Right. So I got exposed to all these different things to see the wisdom in it and the folly in it. So I think God set my path. These jobs I've had taught love and compassion and mercy, and all these experiences I've had, and the very diverse people I've met. I see the wisdom and stuff and the folly of stuff. It sounds like Solomon. You just got to do the folly yourself before you realize it's folly. Yeah. And I've done a lot of stupid. But I asked for love and wisdom, and I think through this windy path, it's been made available. But should I choose to walk in it?
So I want to ask you one follow-up question, and I've never asked any of the people I've talked to this. I probably am from here on out, but it just came to me as you were talking. If someone who was watching wanted your level of assuredness that you were on the right path, where would you tell them to start?
So I would just start with Genesis 1:1, and just read through that slowly, carefully, and say, God, why'd you do that?
Is there a certain translation you would tell them to read, or like
Tree of Life? English Standard Version's good.
The ESV.
Yeah, ESV is good. The Tree of Life version's good. Those are just, I don't have a particular translation. Those just came to mind. But you can go to BibleGateway.com and you can look up like 300 translations and see how all of them say something. Just Bible Gateway and scroll down. But ask God, why did you do that? Because he looked at like all the Torah stuff. Somehow these people knew what germs were back in Leviticus. They knew if you mix fabrics, they make them very flammable. The second leading cause of death in the pioneer days was house fires, because the women wore dresses made of like cotton and wool together. Instantly, burn you alive. Yeah. But if you have just cotton or just wool, it's almost flame retardant. Airline safety people. This airline safety guy was on Oprah. I was asking God, like, at some point, like, this is silly. What the heck? This is strange. Like reading Old Testament is strange sometimes. And Oprah comes on. I only watch Oprah, and this airline pilot safety guy's there. He's like, don't wear mixed fabrics in the airplane. Like the synthetics will melt to your body. Right. But the mixed ones will just slide up. But like, how do they know? Like thousands of years ago, and all these things about germs and and the earth was round. Jesus said one person to be in bed, one person to be out in the field. Like, well, obviously it's nighttime in one place and daylight in the other place. So Jesus knew the earth was round a long time before anyone else.
Right.
So just ask God why, and He'll show you. Just humbly ask and be thankful for the answer, and He'll show you why, and that'll build your faith. Like, I can't explain this any other way. Some divine supernatural power told these people what to do to live a long life. In Deuteronomy 28-30, I'll give you long life in the land, you keep His commandments. They have no way of knowing any of this science stuff. But He knew a higher power, higher intelligence, told them how to live a long life, and they did. And it's all about ask for mercy, get understanding. God will give you mercy to understand it, and He'll show you why He did that. And once you realize there's a higher power that's smarter than you could ever be, and more loving than you could ever be, why would you ever choose to go with your own thoughts or anyone else's? As human beings, they never live more than 100 years. Our IQ caps out at like 180, and we do wicked stuff all over the news. So why would we trust ourselves or any other human to lead us over a spiritual being that obviously has unlimited intelligence and unlimited benevolence?
Word.
So like that's why you trust God over yourself. He's smarter. He's smarter and kinder than anyone you ever met. So this is kind of a no-brainer at that point. It's just logic.
Yeah, right on.
Just blind. It's just logic. Like He's smarter. He's kinder than me and everyone else I know. So why would we pick our own way, which obviously doesn't work? You can watch CNN for 5 minutes and see where that gets us.
Yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate you like sharing your story, sharing your journey, your faith. I think it's been incredible. People want to check out what you're doing. Psalms 116 Ministry.
Psalm16ministry.com.
Psalm16ministry.com.
Yeah.
And they can go on there, find out what you're involved in,
Yeah.
what projects you're doing, whether it's the dream interpretation, the purpose finding stuff.
Coaching, yeah.
Awesome.
Books, all that stuff. So there's Psalm16ministry.com is me. And there's I built a big resource library, Shalom to Your Heart. Like shalom, like peace.
Yeah.
ShalomToYourHeart.com. So if you're looking for a job, you're trying to find some resources like housing or emergency shelters, or you need some counseling, or you have theological questions. I just took all the videos and books and articles I found on topics.
Yeah.
And I just put it on there. So it's
Awesome.
a practical resource, theological resource. So ShalomToYourHeart.com is a virtual library, and then Psalm16ministry.com is me.
Yeah.
My stuff. So just look it up and reach out if you need anything.
Well, honestly, man, like most scenarios, I don't know if I'm going to be observing Passover this year.
Sorry.
But
If you want to, let me know.
Man, I really respect your walk. Like, I didn't know with your initial message what I was going to be getting myself
We were
into.
total strangers like 5 days ago.
Yeah. But man, like, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I've pulled some nuggets out of it of stuff that I want to digest and research for my own spiritual path.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you being on here, man.
I appreciate being here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dude, thank you so much.
Give shalom to you and your family.